Tripp goes on to outline a bunch of distorted uses of the rod. So he says this is what it is. It's a parental exercise. These are his subheadings. A parental exercise, an act of faith, an act of faithfulness, a responsibility. You're not on your own errand, you're on God's. Remember, you're God's agent of authority. It's a physical punishment, and it's a rescue mission. So that's his framing of it. He does go on to say, look, there are ways this can go too far, and he's going to call these distortions of the rod. No unbridled temper. You can't hit children whenever you want. You can't vent your frustration. It can't be retributive, and it's not associated with vindictive anger. And I appreciate that he does put these in. I'm going to make the observation again that these are all subjective, that a parent may have no metric to gauge whether they're acting out of retributive anger. They may not believe they're venting frustration. What does unbridled temper mean? And is it better to be spanking out of anger in a calm, detached way or an unbridled way? Both are still harmful. So these are problematic, I think, and this is quite common in popular Christian parenting teaching that does advocate for spanking. These sort of disclaimers that are really going to attempt to say, look, spanking itself isn't abusive, and they're trying to distinguish why. What crosses the line from spanking into abuse? And it's difficult to parse that out, which is why you end up with these kind of subjective metrics that really are unsatisfactory. Tripp offers this distinction. He's to the subjective metric. He says children will be able to recognize that what they do if a child hits when they strike someone in anger is very different from the patient and gracious use of the rod outlined in this book. And again, he just says that. He offers no evidence or no argument. It's a reassurance that I think is worth saying on what basis. Why are children going to receive being hit by an adult as somehow more patient and gracious? And certainly when you step out of the realm of nouthetic counseling into the realm of studies attempting to explore this, and it's a very difficult question to explore because it's multifaceted. What plays into a household that opts for spanking? How is spanking administered? How is it received by each individual child? It's a difficult thing to quantify, but to suggest that don't worry, whatever that it will be measured, it will be received according to intentions, parental intentions, seems woefully naive across the board, not only with spanking, but just in general. He also does on page 111 say that spanking should be done in the privacy of the home because of concerns over parents being perceived as abusive. So this also is a common thing unfortunately, in popular Christian parenting teaching, where again and again, parents are told to do spanking in private to avoid external interference or to avoid being questioned for abuse, which you would hope would cause parents to ask themselves, what am I doing? If there's a blurred line there, if the kind of punishment or training or discipline, whatever word they're using, can't be done in public transparently without drawing concern from bystanders, what am I even doing? But this really normalizes that and normalizes any objections that might come from extended family members or neighbors or anybody. This gives really a justification for parents to say, oh, well, they don't understand. They're part of this external culture, because Ted couches this in that culture language that says our culture's kind of lost respect for spanking, and spanking has come under scrutiny. So they don't understand. Those people outside don't understand. And that insularity really enables abuse because, as I've said over and over again, there's no cap to this kind of thinking. Best case scenario, someone is very carefully trying to administer this and is thoughtfully trying to parse this all out. But we know of countless worst case scenarios and many more that just are quietly happening behind closed doors. So it's concerning whenever I see that. I find it really irresponsible of parenting experts to do that without thinking through the implications of what might happen to vulnerable children. Ted also goes on to talk about the rod as a concept of authority. And this, I think, was pretty unobjectionable. This is insightful. We don't see this a lot in popular Christian parenting teaching, where the idea of the rod as a metaphor for authority, which I think is an accurate approach to understanding it, is explored. So often it's just said, this is corporal punishment, this is spanking, or this is a literal stick you need to switch your child with. He does explore it, but for some reason, he still is going to insist that it also literally must mean hitting your child. And he's going to go on to explain how to do that in a really prescriptive way. Final comment on this chapter, on page 113, he says, a wild promise. It's not prosperity gospel, it's just a wild promise. He says, the rod promotes an atmosphere of closeness and openness between parent and child. The parent who is engaging his child and refusing to ignore things that challenge the integrity of their relationship will experience intimacy with his child. When a child is allowed to be sullen and disobedient, distance develops between the parent and child. The parent who refuses to allow estrangement will enjoy a close and open relationship. And this reminded me of just a couple weeks ago, I was looking at the teaching coming out of Doug Wilson in Moscow, and there's a clip there of the pastors in the community talking about after spanking happens, really a child must demonstrate that fellowship has been restored, and they must come out and be happy and welcome back in. And I was thinking about this when I read this, that this is telling, I think, parents what they want to hear, that this doesn't damage, spanking won't damage connection with their children. And if there is a natural consequence to the spanking, like the child doesn't want to be close to you because you just hit them, or the child doesn't want to hug and pray with you now, or a parent feels intuitively guilty or distressed, I think it's traumatic for parents and children alike. And when that happens, Ted is going to say, no, that's actually intimacy you're experiencing, and you must not allow that estrangement to happen. I'm really spotlighting that here because the fruit of this years down the road is when there is a consequence to interacting this way, the kind of interaction that damages connection, the tools are missing because a parent believes that it's in their power to refuse to allow estrangement, this kind of engulfing mentality that says you're not permitted to put up boundaries, to have distance with me, no matter what I do. And so I think this can really set a foundation that has a lot of applications that cause problems for families down the road.